Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Randall Hardy. On behalf of Next Step New Life, I wish to welcome our guest today is Mark Burch. Mark A. Burch. He's an author, an educator, a group facilitator who has practiced simple living since the 1960s, and since 1995 offers presentations, workshops, and courses on voluntary simplicity, and we'll go into what that is in a moment. He's the retired director of the Campus Sustainability Office for the University of Winnipeg, former co-director of the Simplicity Practice and Resource Center, and former instructional fellow with the Canadian School of Peacebuilding in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He's been a featured guest on CBC TV, which the show was Man Alive, and What on Earth, CBC Radio Ideas, Vision TV's The Simple Way, and a radio columnist on Discovering Simplicity for CBC Winnipeg. He has published 5 books on voluntary simplicity, including Stepping Lightly, Simplicity for People, and the Planet. Hi, Mark. You're there?
Good morning. I am very much here.
Good, great. I wanted to tell our audience that I had contacted you many years ago after reading this book, Simplicity for the People and the Planet. I guess it must have been 6 or 7 years ago, and I bought it, and I've had it with me ever since. Whenever I need a reminder to get back to the basics, getting into the headspace of more conscious living. Nowadays, one may call it mindful living in relationship to ecology and the planet and even people. It seems to span so many areas of our life, Mark. Could you tell me and our audience what exactly is voluntary simplicity?
Well, it's something that the more you think about it and the more you live it and the more you try to practice it, the more it reveals of itself. And there have been a lot of people over many centuries who have spoken about simple living or voluntary poverty, as they've called it, or a vow of poverty. And there's lots of definitions for that. A classic one comes from Richard Gregg, who called it the deliberate organization of life for a purpose. And I really like his definition because it takes us, first of all, away from the idea that it's simply about cleaning closets or emptying the garage or emptying out the basement. Richard Gregg's definition, the deliberate organization of the whole of life, means that it's something we do voluntarily, on purpose, with forethought, and it's something that addresses the shape of the whole of our life, and that shape is given its specific form by the purpose that we're living for. So it's rooted in this insight or an evolving understanding of what our life is about, and the shape that its material aspect needs to take in order to honor that purpose. Dwayne Elgin, who is a famous advocate of voluntary simplicity, currently lives in California, I think, San Luis Obispo, described it as a way of life which is outwardly simple and inwardly rich.
Beautiful.
So the nice thing about Elgin's definition is that it emphasizes this balance between inner and outer, and our way of life in North America is very outer directed. It's very related to perceptions and image and what other people think of us and reputation and power and so on. And Elgin is there saying, well, there's this whole interior dimension of our lives that needs to be in balance with that and inform that and dialogue with that. The definition I have come up with that expresses the essence of this for me is a way of life that's rooted in mindfulness, and through the practice of sufficiency aims for the maximum of overall well-being on the minimum of material consumption. So, with Elgin and Gregg, I agree it's a way of life. I'm using the term mindfulness because it's both a practice and the state of consciousness which arises from that practice. So mindfulness is very fundamental. But so is this principle of sufficiency, of enoughness. So we're bringing mindfulness to our daily life with always an awareness of how much is enough, and continually discerning what is contributing to my well-being and to the well-being of the planet and my family and my community, and what doesn't, and then making those discriminations gently and consciously to give life a shape which is mindful, proportionate, and rooted in well-being.
Wow. Well, one of the sections of your book that I have outlined, Mark, is that I just want to read this little passage here. It says, simplicity involves centering thinking and action upon what is most essential and central to our humanity. Precisely because of this, simplicity also tends to a healthy kind of materialism. By this, I mean a deep respect for the material or physical world, for the resources it provides us, for the responsibility and power we have to be the co-creators either of beauty, utility, and lasting value, or of ugliness, futility, and waste. Doing this may involve living inexpensively, although not always. It will certainly involve applying human ingenuity to existing materials and wastes to bring out of them something better than we have now. This leads me to my next question, Mark. Many people think that, or when they first hear about this idea of simplicity, they say, does this mean that I have to go back in time? Are you talking about going back to the horse and buggy times? I get this, too, when I talk about the basics in wellness. How would we live if we lived in nature? Now, of course, we're not asking people to go back 400 years. We have to live in this moment. But how can we live in this modern convenience, without modern conveniences, in this modern society, and still practice simplicity without living like cavemen?
Right, yeah. First of all, the caveman image, or the little house on the prairie, or however however it is you want to describe it, I think is sort of a media stereotype. And it also has roots in nostalgia. Like, we all think that, or many of us, I think that life in the 19th century was somehow simpler because it was technologically more primitive and was therefore better. I question that assumption. I don't know that it was, and my understanding of simple living is not regressive. It doesn't mean going back anywhere. Mm-hmm. It means going forward past consumer culture to a new culture, which is more mindful and which is based more on gratitude and appreciation and love of others and love of material things, but not the way they are loved in consumer culture right now. It's there's a quote from Wendell Berry, who was a philosopher from Tennessee, I think, who I can't quote word for word, but the essence of what he said was, we need to be aware that every day we break the body and shed the blood of creation, and that is what sustains us. And when we do this with consciousness and reverence, it can be an act of worship. But when we do it mindlessly and without gratitude or appreciation, then it becomes a kind of desecration. And what I'm driving at here is that I think our selection of modern conveniences, our use of technology, the decisions we make around what technology to adopt and what not to develop, need to be more informed, not just by the profit motive, which is the case now, but instead of the profit motive, this sense that the material world is holy, and our participation in it is a wonderful opportunity for which we can feel grateful and which we need to approach with mindfulness and appreciation. So I think in the passage you just quoted from my book, I'm saying that I think at the root of simplicity is not a rejection of the material order. Rather, it's an embracing of it with a deeper sense of appreciation, with a sense of its sacredness and the responsibility that is entailed in that relationship. So you can't just build throwaway stuff. That's a kind of desecration. But if you bring good design and intelligence and a real connection between what you're making and what people actually need, if you bring all of that into the act of reshaping matter in order to serve humans, then I think it leads us to a better place, and to a place where pollution is unthinkable and conservation is essential, and care given to one's work for the sake of the work, not the profit it makes or the wages I take home, but for the sake of the work itself. All of that, to me, represents a higher quality of life than the one we have now, and also a way of living that's more sustainable over the long term.
So, Mark,
so it's not about going back.
Yes. And it very often in your book, and as we're speaking now, your suggestion is this is a way of life. It's about reprioritizing your values. It's finding meaning, as opposed to, I think there was some part of your book that said it's not about who dies with the most toys wins. It's not about accumulating more and bigger. We seem to want to move quicker and faster, and there's no joy in just simply living. Would that be correct?
Yes. And I mean, it's also, I keep returning to this theme of mindfulness, but it's about bringing mindfulness back to every relationship we have, whether it's with an object or a creature or an element of nature or another person. If one guitar and learning how to play one guitar brings an added benefit to my life and increases the quality of my life, does it follow that my life is twice as good if I have two guitars, or 10 times as good if I have 10, when, in fact, there's only 24 hours in the day, and I can only play one guitar so long, right?
Yes.
So if I have 10 of them, then I'm only using them 1/10 as much, and I'm depriving 9 other people of the chance to play a guitar themselves. So, what contributes more? I mean, it's sort of like bringing this mindfulness to the inherent limitations that also go with living at a material level, at a physical level, and making our decisions accordingly.
Mark, I'm going to read another passage from your book. You've mentioned mindfulness a few times, and some people, we hear these words, but I think your description of it can give people an idea of what we're talking about here. You say practitioners of voluntary simplicity value a mindful, unhurried, intentional rather than impulsive, and appreciative approach to living. Some practitioners value mindfulness as a personal spiritual practice in its own right. They also see applying the insights they gain through cultivating a mindful approach to living as part of living with personal integrity. For many, this is synonymous with spiritual practice. That's a good definition, and it's basically not living unconsciously.
Exactly.
Staying aware.
One of the things that I found fascinating is since I wrote that, there's been more research done by psychologists and others on mindfulness and its relation to simple living. And I guess when I was writing that, I was thinking, I'm making a choice to live more simply, which frees up time. How do I use my time? And one way I use my time is the formal practice of mindfulness meditation, but also just taking more time during the day to try to remember to be mindful and be present to whatever it is I'm doing.
Yes.
But then I started to discover this research where the researchers began to discover among people who take up mindfulness practice or some other contemplative or meditative practice for other reasons, for religious reasons or spiritual reasons or stress management reasons,